Hey guys, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to MBBS Treasure Channel. Today we are going to read a topic of physiology, and under that topic today we are going to discuss excitation of tissue. Under that excitation of tissue there are some important terminology that we should know, that is what is the excitable tissue is first of all thing, then what is excitability, then what are the stimulus excitation, then types of stimulus, then what is threshold of stimulus, then what are the types of thresholds, condition required for this excitation, then what is membrane potential, then what is the critical level of depolarization. So without wasting time, let's begin our today's topic. Okay, so today's topic is excitation of tissue. In this topic, why are we going to read this topic, or what is the importance of this topic in our day-to-day life? First of all, we should know this. Excitation means the impulse or the information that will be generated in a certain kind of cells and that will be transmitted to another kind of cells, or from one cell to another cell through excitation of the previous cell. The information will be transmitted. There are so many cells in the environment, so many types of cells in the environment, but all the cells are excitable. Why? Because they respond to certain changes in the environment. The response can be of three types, like chemical response, electrical response, and then biological response. The biological response is the respective function of the cells or the living organisms. So it is little bit slower than the two types of response, that is electrical and chemical response. Okay, so what is excitable tissue is? The excitable tissue means there will be a certain kind of tissue or certain kind of cells that will be generating automatically electrochemical impulses. And through that electrochemical impulses, the information will be transmitted from one cell to another cell. What are the types of excitable tissue we know? That is nervous cell and muscle cells. The nervous and muscle cells that are present in our body are the most important cells that that are responsible for the transmission of these electrochemical impulses, and they are the main source of generation of electrochemical impulses. Okay, then what is excitability? Excitability means the ability of the tissue to get excited in response to the stimuli. The nervous and the muscle tissue that are present in our body or in a certain living organisms, they respond to certain kind of things that is known as stimuli. Here comes an extra terminology, or that we should know that what is a stimuli is. It's an external and or an internal agent that is responsible for causing certain change in the membrane potential. Listen, if this is a cell and if this is a stimuli, the cell will be having its cell membrane potential, and there will be the change in the membrane potential when this stimuli will be acting on this cell. Okay, there will be certain kind of change in the membrane potential when this stimuli will be acting on the cell. So this, when the stimuli acts on the cell, it causes some changes in the membrane potential, and that change is known as excitation. So another word comes here is that what is an excitation? It is an active state of the tissue in response to stimuli. Okay, now you understood that what is an excitable tissue, what is excitability, what is stimuli, then excitation. I want to add one more thing, that excitability is the property of excitable tissue. So, okay, next we are going to read that what are the types of stimulus. As we know that a stimulus is an external irritant agent that will be causing excitation and that will be leading to a generation of action potential in the excitable tissue. So, according to the character and property, the stimulus are divided. In character, there are three types of stimulus, like physical, chemical, and biological, and in property wise, adequate and inadequate. Physical, chemical, and biological. In physical, the examples like the temperature, pressure can also cause excitation and will be acting as a stimulus. Then in chemicals like the certain kinds of chemical reagents or ions may be acting as a stimulus. Then in biological, the hormones mainly in living cells acts as a stimulus. Then property. Inadequate and inadequate. What does this mean? Adequate means the proper amount of energy or the stimulus must be having enough strength to create an excitation. Then it will be coming under adequate. If the stimulus will not be having that much amount of energy or the strength for generating excitation in the excitable tissue, then it will be coming under inadequate type of stimulus. Then what is threshold of stimulation? We know that in the tissue it requires certain kind of or certain amount of proper amount of strength of the stimulus for causing an excitation. That minimum strength of stimuli to cause an excitation is known as threshold amount of stimulation. Okay, then what are the types of threshold of stimulation? Listen, if the energy or if the strength of the stimuli is present, then there will be more two types of threshold, that will be supra threshold, that will be higher than the minimum threshold of stimulation, will be greater, and in sub threshold it will, means that the energy or the strength will be less than the threshold of stimulation. It's simple. Like in threshold it will be greater than threshold strength, and in sub threshold the strength will be less than the threshold strength. Okay, then what is the condition of excitation? If the tissue is getting excited, so what should be the condition that it must get so that it can get excited? Like it, firstly the tissue must be excitable, then secondly there must be enough strength, like threshold of stimulation or threshold stimuli is required for causing the excitation. Then third one is enough duration. There must be enough time required or enough time given to the cell so that it can excite. Okay. Then comes the membrane potential of the cell. What do you mean by membrane potential? The potential difference across the cell membrane is known as the membrane potential. If, for example, this is a cell and the border is the cell membrane, then the cell membrane contains inside certain kind of ions or charge, and outside it contains certain charges. Inside the potassium ion is maximum, whereas the sodium outside is maximum. So the ratio is 3 is to 2. Sodium is to potassium ratio is 3 is to 2. So the outside of the membrane is positive in charge and inside the membrane is negative in charge. The units of membrane potential is millivolt, and the membrane potential are in the ratio of 3 is to 2 in a normal cell. 3 means sodium ion concentration and 2 means potassium ion concentration. Then the membrane potential can be divided into two types. First one at a rest stage, that is resting membrane potential, and second one is at active state, that is action potential. For understanding these things, resting membrane potential and action potential, I have depicted a small figure that you can see. At rest stage, this is a cell. Already it is in a polarized state. Polarized means at a normal resting state in which inside the cell is negative and outside is the positive due to that 3:2 ratio. When a stimuli is at or a stimulus acts on these cells, then the cell gets excited. Obviously, the stimuli must be having strength more than the threshold energy so that it can excite the cell, and it will be causing depolarization of the cell. What do you mean by depolarization of the cell? The polarization changes from the previous one to a new state. It means that previously it had positive charges on the outside of the cell membrane, and in the next it has positive charges in the inside. That means here comes the influx of sodium ions and outflux of potassium ions due to the opening of sodium gated channel and the opening of potassium gated channel upon excitation, causing the polarization, causing the change in polarization of the cell from polarized cell to depolarized cell. So next thing is that I am going to describe the polarized and depolarized cell more briefly. Before excitation, what happens? That the membrane have the positive charges outside the cell and negative charges inside the cell due to the 3:2 ratio of sodium and potassium ions in the distribution in the cell membrane. This is the condition before stimuli. And during the polarized condition, there is always the influx of potassium ion maintaining the charge distribution inside the cell membrane potential as negative. Then in the depolarization state, what happens? The channel of potassium ions get closed, so there will be not influx of potassium ions. Rather, the channels for sodium ion or sodium gated channel opens in the depolarization. This is the condition when the stimuli acts on the cell, causes excitation, opening of the sodium gated channel. So there will be influx of sodium causing the depolarization of the cell. So there is a change in the charge distribution over the membrane, as inside it is positive and outside it is negative. Okay. So next comes here is the last one, critical level of depolarization. What do you mean by this? The minimum level of membrane potential above which the cell will be depolarized. So the minimum membrane potential above which the depolarization will be occur. And what are the characteristics of depolarization? Depolarization is the state of the cell in which there will be rapid influx of sodium ion, first thing, and rapid influx means there will be opening of sodium channel. Then it is of short duration of time. It is a very short span of time that the cell get changed from polarized condition to depolarized condition. One thing I want to add here is that this is important, that the membrane potential of the cell is always negative. Why we call that the membrane potential of the cell is always negative? Because according to the structure or according to the fact of 3:2 ratio of sodium is to potassium, the membrane have positive outside and negative as inside. And according to the definition of potential difference or membrane potential, the potential difference across the cell membrane, that is inside minus outside. So inside is negative, then minus, then positive is outside. So what will be the resultant? It will be always negative. So the cell membrane or the membrane potential of the cell at resting state is always negative. Then let's draw an example of resting membrane potential RMP of nervous tissue as well as critical level of depolarization of nervous tissue. This will be the potential in millivolt and this will be the time. Okay. In the resting state, it will be having a constant, because as the time will pass, the membrane potential will not change because it is in a condition called rest. That means no stimuli is acting on the cell of nervous tissue. So what is the minimum resting potential, resting membrane potential of nervous tissue? It is minus 70 millivolt. And if we will say what will be the critical level of depolarization of the nervous tissue, it is minus 55. This is called CLD and this is called RMP. It means if the energy or the strength of the stimuli will be greater than the minus 70 millivolt, then it will be causing an excitation. It will be causing an excitation, and once if it will reaching, or once if this excited cell will reach the critical level of depolarization, then it will rapidly undergoes depolarization process. Then it will repolarize, and then further it will comes to the resting state. This is the axial potential graph of a nervous tissue that we are going to read further. Okay, so for now you must understand this much. What is critical level of depolarization, and then what is resting membrane potential of nervous tissue. If I will compare the resting membrane potential of muscle tissue, then it will be here around like this, minus 90 millivolt of, this will be of muscle tissue. Okay, this is an important graph. You should remember that what is critical level of depolarization and what is resting membrane potential of different nervous tissue, then muscle tissue. And one more example is that if there will be erythrocytic cells, it will be minus 25. Okay, so this is all for today, and in the next class we will be reading about the action potential graphs of the nervous tissue, okay, and muscle tissue also. Thank you.